My name is Samantha, and at 28 years old, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. Growing up as the responsible child, working 2 jobs through college while my younger brother James got everything handed to him, taught me plenty about unfairness. But nothing prepared me for the night I overheard my father tell my brother, "Do not worry, we will make your sister pay for everything." Their plan shattered my world. What they did not know was that I would not let them take a single penny from me. Before I dive into this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have protected you the most. I grew up in a middle-class suburban neighborhood in Pennsylvania. My father worked as an accountant at a local firm, and my mother was a sales associate at a department store in the mall. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, with our modest 2-story home, well-maintained lawn, and annual summer vacations to the beach. But inside those 4 walls, a different reality existed. As the firstborn, I was always held to impossibly high standards. My parents expected straight A's, perfect behavior, and mature responsibility from the moment I could understand instructions. When I brought home an A-, my father would ask why it wasn't an A+. When I won second place in the science fair in 4th grade, my mother wondered aloud why I couldn't have worked harder for first place. Then came James, my brother, 5 years younger than me. From the day my parents brought him home from the hospital, it was clear he would be treated differently. While I had plain white furniture in my room, James got a custom-painted race-car bed and walls covered with expensive decals. Where I received practical gifts like clothes and books, James unwrapped the latest video games, toys, and gadgets. "Your brother is still little," my mother would explain when I questioned the disparities. "Boys need more encouragement," my father would add. As if being a girl somehow made me naturally more resilient to disappointment and neglect. By the time I was 10, I was responsible for washing dishes, helping with laundry, and keeping my room spotless. James, meanwhile, left trails of toys and snack wrappers throughout the house without consequence. "Just pick up after him," my mother would sigh when I complained. "He's just being a boy." When I turned 12, babysitting duties were added to my list of responsibilities. I became the unpaid caretaker whenever my parents went out for dinner or to see friends. "You are so mature for your age," they would say, as if it were a compliment rather than an expectation they had forced upon me. The Christmas I was 14 stood out in my memory as particularly painful. I had been asking for a laptop for school for months, researching affordable options and explaining how it would help me with assignments. On Christmas morning, I unwrapped a second-hand laptop that barely functioned. 2 hours later, James tore open the packaging of a brand new gaming computer that cost 3 times as much as what I had asked for. "Your brother needs it for his games," my father explained when he saw my expression. "And you know those games help with hand-eye coordination and problem solving." What about my education? What about my needs? These questions remained unasked because I already knew the answers. The pattern continued into high school. I got a part-time job at 16 to save for college, while James, only 11, was excused from chores so he could focus on his childhood. I worked long hours at the grocery store, studied late into the night, and still managed to stay at the top of my class. My parents rarely praised me. Instead, they reminded me that everything I was doing was expected. "College won't pay for itself," my father would remind me. "You're the oldest, you need to set the example." Meanwhile, James got his first car at 16, a used but still shiny Honda Civic that my parents paid for in full. I didn't get a car until I bought one myself with my own savings, and even then, my father criticized me for spending too much money on it. By the time I graduated, I had grown used to the idea that I would always be the responsible one, the provider, the problem solver, but nothing could have prepared me for adulthood, where that dynamic didn't just continue, it escalated. When I got my first full-time job after college, my parents suddenly had emergencies that needed financial help. A late mortgage payment, a surprise medical bill, repairs for James's car after he drove it carelessly into a fence. Somehow, the responsibility always fell on me. "You're making good money now," my mother would say, her voice sugar-coated but expectant. "You know your brother isn't in the same position," my father would add. I told myself I was just helping, that family comes first, but in reality, I was enabling a system that had been designed since childhood. James would be protected at all costs, and I would always be the one to pay. That night, when I overheard my father say to James, "Do not worry, We will make your sister pay for everything. Something inside me broke. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about betrayal. Betrayal so deep it rewrote everything I thought I knew about family. And that's when I decided, they would never see me as their personal safety net again. I did not look back in the rearview mirror. The temptation was there, one last glance at the house I had grown up in, the driveway where I had parked countless nights after long shifts, the porch light that was supposed to mean safety but had only ever felt like surveillance. But I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead. Looking back would only slow me down, and for the first time in my life, I had no intention of slowing down for anyone. I checked into an airport hotel about 20 minutes away, deliberately choosing a large national chain where I could quietly rack up reward points on my credit card. I wanted anonymity, and those places specialized in it. The night clerk didn't even look up fully from the glow of his phone as he took my ID, slid it across the counter, and handed me a key card. That casual indifference felt oddly comforting after a lifetime of being scrutinized and judged at home. By 4 a.m., I was finally inside a sterile, neutral hotel room. The crisp sheets and humming air conditioner offered something I hadn't realized I craved, an environment that asked nothing of me. But there would be no rest yet. I had work to do. I set my suitcase against the wall, pulled out my laptop, and began the first step of my plan. I logged into my primary bank account and transferred almost every cent into a secondary account I had opened quietly years ago, a financial safety net my parents had no idea existed. I left only enough in the primary account to avoid suspicious activity alerts or account fees. Next came my credit cards. I dialed the 24-hour service line, rehearsing my story as the hold music droned in my ear. When the representative answered, I explained that I suspected fraud might soon be attempted in my name. My voice was calm, measured, even as adrenaline surged beneath the surface. For my main card, I requested a full freeze, claiming I had misplaced my wallet. A replacement card would be mailed to my New York address, rendering the current one useless. Layer by layer, I was stripping away my family's access to me. I emailed my financial advisor, flagging the message as urgent, and requested a video call the next day to review my entire portfolio. I didn't spell out why, I didn't need to, but I emphasized the importance of tightening every possible security measure. Then came the harder part, my job. I drafted an email to my boss explaining that I needed to take a couple of emergency personal days, Monday and possibly Tuesday. I was careful in my wording, professional, vague, but firm. I had more than enough vacation time accrued, and I knew my team could handle the workload in my absence. Still, hitting send on that message was like exhaling after holding my breath too long. I was prioritizing myself, and it felt strange, almost rebellious. The final piece was legal protection. I searched online for New York firms specializing in financial security and identity protection. Within minutes, I found a highly rated practice that offered weekend consultations. My inquiry email was detailed but cautious. I explained enough to secure their attention but held back specifics until I could speak to someone in confidence. By the time I closed my laptop, a pale light had begun seeping through the heavy hotel curtains. The sun was rising on a new day, and, in a way, on a new version of me. I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that made my limbs heavy, but my mind was too sharp, too wired to surrender to sleep. I ordered room service, black coffee, eggs, toast, and sat by the window watching the sun climb above the airport horizon. For once, I wasn't thinking about what my family needed or expected from me. I was thinking only of myself. The silence shattered around 9 a.m. when my phone began to vibrate across the desk. First, a text from my mother, "Where did you go?" Then another, more insistent, "We're worried. Call us." Soon after, the calls began, her number flashing again and again, followed by my father's. Their persistence had once held power over me, but now, I pressed "Do not disturb" and let the screen go black. For the first time in years, I felt a rush of control. By 11 o'clock, I had checked out, boarded the shuttle, and arrived at the airport. I'd already changed my ticket to the earliest available flight back to New York, paying the change fee without hesitation. Money was no longer their leash around my neck, it was my shield. As I sat at the gate, I finally let myself feel the weight of it all. The hurt was not fleeting, it was a deep, hollow ache in my chest that stole the air from my lungs. Not because I had lost something valuable, but because I had finally accepted I never had it to begin with. My family had never seen me as a daughter to love or protect. To them, I was an ATM with a heartbeat. When the boarding call came, I rose with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I carried grief with me onto that plane, yes, but also resolve. By the time the wheels touched down at LaGuardia, the grief had softened into something else, a strange, quiet strength, I retrieved my luggage, hailed a cab, and directed the driver to my condo. When I turned the key in the lock and stepped inside, I was overcome with the most unexpected feeling: homecoming. This was mine. Every corner of the condo bore the mark of my hard work, late nights, promotions, sacrifices that were mine alone. I dropped my suitcase by the door and moved slowly through the rooms, brushing my fingertips across the furniture, the photographs, the books stacked neatly on the shelves. They were all silent witnesses to my independence, my survival. I flung open the windows, letting in the cool evening air. The breeze carried with it the symbolic sweep I needed, the last traces of my family's toxic influence drifting out into the night. Tomorrow would be practical: meetings with advisors, consultations with attorneys, a fortress of security built brick by brick. But tonight was mine. I sat on the couch, pulled a blanket around me, and allowed myself to feel everything I had been holding back. I cried for the little girl who had begged for approval she would never receive. I cried for the teenager who had sacrificed her own joy to play the role of caretaker and provider. I cried for the woman I had become, who had achieved success not to be celebrated, but to be exploited. And when the tears finally dried, what lingered wasn't sorrow, it was relief. The endless climb toward impossible approval was over. I no longer had to beg for scraps of love from people who only ever saw me as a resource. I was free, freer than I had ever been. That night, in the safety of my own bed, I slept the kind of sleep that only comes after a war is finally over. My subconscious recognized what my heart had only just begun to accept: I had broken the cycle. I was no longer theirs to use. I was finally, irrevocably, mine.